A single mom stepped onto the plane, hoping for quiet. Instead, she was met with tension that only grew uglier by the minute. The judgment, the comments sharp, unrelenting. Then, just as it peaked, the quiet man beside her turned and spoke 6 words that changed everything. Rachel Hayes wasn't asking for much that morning. No special treatment, no attention. She just wanted a smooth flight, her kids, and a few peaceful hours between Denver and Atlanta. But peace was a luxury she rarely got when traveling alone with 2 young children. At gate B12, she gently bounced her 9-month-old daughter on one hip, while her 5-year-old son, Eli, tugged at the zipper of his overstuffed backpack. Around them, the airport buzzed with tired travelers and echoing announcements. 3 times the gate agent had called out boarding delays. 3 times Rachel sighed, watching the minutes stretch longer and the stares begin. It wasn't nerves that made her sweat, it was anticipation. The kind you get when you already know how the story ends. She had done this before, and every time felt like walking into a room already being judged. The sighs, the side eyes, the unspoken frustration when her baby would inevitably cry. People rarely said a word out loud, but they didn't need to. Their looks were sharp enough. Finally, they called Group 4. Rachel readjusted the bulky car seat slung over her aching shoulder, gripped Eli's small hand, and began the slow, awkward march down the jet bridge. It felt like entering a battlefield she hadn't signed up for, just a mom, a stroller, and 2 kids under 5, trying not to fall apart before the plane even left the ground. They were seated in row 17, middle and window. Rachel gave Eli the window without hesitation. That part was easy. The real challenge was keeping chaos at bay. With one arm balancing her baby and the other wrestling their carry-ons into place, she offered a quick sorry to the aisle passenger who never even glanced up from his glowing tablet. Pressed shirt, stiff posture. He gave off the kind of cold that made it clear. No small talk, no smiles. Rachel didn't mind. She wasn't in the mood for niceties either. For a brief moment, things felt still. The baby had drifted off on her chest, and Eli quietly nibbled on a packet of crackers. Rachel allowed herself a shallow breath, the kind you take when you know peace won't last. And she was right. 10 minutes in, a loud sigh cut through the quiet. Sharp. Intentional. She didn't react. Maybe she reclined too far? Maybe Eli kicked the seat by accident? She brushed it off. But then came another sigh, longer, heavier. This one had weight. Her eyes darted to the man beside her, still glued to his screen, detached and uninterested. No help there. Trying to ignore it, she adjusted the baby's blanket and focused on the flight attendant's safety demonstration. Eli tugged at her sleeve, asking to watch something on her phone. Then it came, the voice. Could you not recline all the way? Some of us don't have that kind of space back here. The tone was cold, tight with irritation, like a warning just beneath the surface. Rachel didn't turn around. She simply nudged her seat forward and whispered, "Sorry about that." But she could feel it, the air stretching thin like a rubber band pulled to its limit. Something was simmering. She hadn't even cracked open her water when it started again. Another sigh, louder. Then a sharp scoff. And finally, the unmistakable pressure of knees shoving into the back of her seat. Not hard enough to draw attention, but firm enough to send a message. I'm not done. Kindly do us a quick favor. Please hit that like and subscribe button if you are touched by this story. Your support keeps us creating and sharing more powerful stories as this one. Thank you. Now let's get back to our story. Rachel leaned over and whispered gently to Eli, her voice low and steady. Sit still for me, okay, baby? Don't look back. Okay, he nodded softly, sensing her tension but not fully understanding it. He was trying, really, his little hands folded in his lap, but curiosity is second nature to children. Barely 2 minutes passed before he tugged at her sleeve again, eyes wide with wonder. "Mommy, what's that for?" he asked, pointing at the emergency card tucked in the seat pocket ahead of him. It was innocent, a simple question, the kind all kids ask when their world is new and full of things to figure out. But when Eli shifted slightly, trying to lean for a better look, his elbow must have grazed the armrest of the passenger behind them. That was all it took. "Seriously?" the man barked, his voice slicing through the soft hum of the cabin. "Control your kid. I don't need to babysit for my seat." Rachel froze. Her mouth opened, but the words caught in her throat. Around her, a few heads turned, some out of curiosity, some just to judge. A woman across the aisle glanced over, then quickly looked away like she hadn't seen anything. She turned halfway in her seat, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm sorry. He didn't mean to bump you." The man didn't flinch. "That's not the point. You people get on planes like it's your damn living room. Some of us paid to not get kicked in the back for 3 hours." Her stomach nodded. She turned back around, holding Eli close to her side. Her daughter still slept against her chest, but Rachel felt like she couldn't breathe. She wanted out of the seat, out of the sky, out of this moment, but she was stuck. 30,000 feet in the air, nowhere to go, with a child too scared to move and a man behind her muttering just loud enough to make sure she heard every word. Unbelievable. Kids. No boundaries. No manners. Her cheeks burned. She stared straight ahead, heart pounding. Crying wasn't an option. Yelling would only make it worse. And the man beside her? Still glued to his screen, as if none of it concerned him. Then came the worst part. Eli tugged on her sleeve once more. His voice, barely above a whisper. "Did I do something bad?" That cracked her wide open. She squeezed his hand tightly. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." And finally, the man next to her moved. No sigh. No show. Just a slow shift of the shoulders and a quiet lowering of his tablet. His eyes met hers, not with pity, but with something steady, like someone who'd watched long enough and had finally decided that this was enough. Rachel felt it instantly. His eyes didn't dart to the man behind them like everyone else's. They landed on her first. Steady. Grounded. Not full of judgment or sympathy, just there. Present. Like someone who had been listening long enough and finally decided to speak. "You okay?" he asked, voice low and calm, just loud enough for her to hear. No need to make a scene. Her instinct was to nod, say the usual "I'm fine," and keep pushing forward like she always did. But Eli was watching, and her baby, even asleep, still clung to her necklace like she could feel the tension in the air. Rachel swallowed hard and nodded faintly. "It's just been a long day." He gave a small nod in return. No pity in his eyes, just understanding. Then, without raising his voice or breaking his composure, he turned slowly and addressed the man behind them. "Sir," he said, calm and direct, "that's enough." A pause. Sharp silence. "Excuse me," the man snapped. "You've made your point," the stranger continued evenly. "She's juggling 2 kids and a row full of strangers. She doesn't need you adding to the weight." The man behind them scoffed. "Do you even know what it's like having a kid kick your seat for 3 hours?" "I do," the stranger replied without flinching. "It's happened. And when it does, I either ignore it or I handle it like an adult. What I don't do is shame a parent in front of their children." The energy in the cabin shifted. Heads turned. One passenger sat up. A woman across the aisle lowered her magazine mid-page. Even the soft drone of in-flight entertainment seemed to quiet. "I'm not humiliating anyone," the man huffed. "I'm asking for basic respect." "No," the stranger said, firmer now. "You're targeting someone who you think won't fight back. That's not respect. That's cowardice. And I'm right here now." The man behind them didn't respond, just let out a loud breath and slammed his back against the seat, arms crossed in silent retreat. Rachel sat frozen, heart pounding, Not from fear this time, but from something gentler. Gratitude. She turned slightly, eyes on the man beside her. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded once. Some people just need a reminder. The baby stirred softly in her arms. Eli looked up at the man, curious. "Are you a coach or something?" The man smiled. "Nope, not a coach." Eli tilted his head. "You sound like my teacher when someone's in trouble." That drew a small laugh from the stranger. Let's just say I've seen enough trouble to recognize it when it shows up. For the first time that day, Rachel let out a real laugh. Not forced, not polite. Just real.
She didn't know his name.
Didn't know where he was headed or why he even cared. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Someone had seen her. Had seen all of it. The struggle, the exhaustion, the quiet fight to hold it together. And instead of turning away, he stood beside her. Not with noise. Not with ego. Just with quiet strength. But the flight wasn't over yet, and neither was the man behind them. His silence wasn't surrender. It was the kind that coils, waiting. Rachel tried to ease back into the moment, doing what moms do best, managing the little things that keep everything from falling apart. She tucked the blanket snugly around her sleeping daughter, passed Eli his headphones, and tapped open a cartoon on her phone, hoping the distraction would hold for a while. Maybe, just maybe, the worst had passed. But peace is fragile at 30,000 feet. 10 minutes later, it started again. Not a tantrum. Not a cry. This time, it was the grown man behind them. His knees pressed deliberately into the back of Rachel's seat. Slow, rhythmic taps. Not enough to cause a scene, but enough to say, "I'm still here." She adjusted forward, biting down the urge to react. Then came the whisper, low but sharp. Maybe she'll get the hint this time. Rachel froze. Before she could say a word, the man next to her sat upright, no longer passive. His voice was clear now, his tone firmer than before. "Sir, I already asked once. Let's not take this further than it needs to go." The air tightened around row 17. Heads began to turn again. Tension wrapped itself around the cabin like static before a storm. Rachel glanced down the aisle. The flight attendants were 2 rows up, mid-service, balancing trays of drinks and tiny bags of pretzels. She thought about calling for help, but that meant drawing attention. That meant putting herself back under the spotlight. Again. The man beside her glanced over, his voice quieter now but unwavering. "You shouldn't have to handle this alone." She hesitated, then asked what had been circling in her mind. "Can I just switch seats with you?" He shook his head, calm and certain. "No need. He's the one out of line, not you." Then, with a subtle motion, he flagged down the attendant passing by. No fuss. No drama. Just clarity. "Excuse me," he said as she leaned down. "Would you mind speaking with the gentleman behind us? He's been kicking her seat and making repeated comments." It's escalating. Rachel watched the attendant's polite smile disappear. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She nodded, said she'd return shortly. Behind them, the man groaned loudly. "Oh, what now?" The response came swiftly. "Now," Marcus said evenly, "you stop treating people like they don't matter and focus on your own seat." His voice wasn't raised, wasn't emotional, but that made it land harder. Rachel gently rocked her daughter, who stirred lightly in her arms, head tucked into her chest. Eli had removed his headphones, resting them in his lap, watching everything unfold in quiet stillness. Rachel turned slightly and asked, "What's your name?" The man glanced her way, then extended a hand. "Marcus Reed." She shook it gently. "Rachel." "Nice to meet you, Rachel," he said. "Sorry it had to be under these circumstances." Her smile was weary, but real. "Me too." Moments later, the flight attendant returned and leaned down, this time at the row behind them. Something was about to shift. Rachel couldn't make out the words, but she caught the expression. Tight jaw, clipped nod, the kind of look that follows a firm warning. After that, the man behind her went silent. No more passive-aggressive jabs. No more knee taps. Just stillness. She let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The baby stayed asleep. Eli leaned gently into her side, comforted again. And beside her, Marcus quietly returned to his book, like none of it had ever happened. But Rachel knew better. Something about him stuck with her. Not just what he said, but how he said it. There was a presence to him, something grounded. The cabin had settled, but her thoughts hadn't. Her mind kept looping back. The comments. The shame. Eli's little voice asking if he'd done something wrong. It pressed on her chest like an invisible weight. Each time her anxiety began to rise, her eyes drifted to Marcus.
Calm. Still.
Unshaken. Like he'd been through worse and knew how to hold steady. Eli tugged her sleeve. "Is he a policeman?" he whispered, wide-eyed. Rachel smiled gently. "I'm not sure, baby." She turned to Marcus. "My son thinks you're some kind of superhero." Marcus gave a soft laugh. "I wore a uniform once. Maybe that counts." "You're retired?" she asked. He paused, then shook his head. "Still active. Air Force." Her eyebrows lifted. "Really?" "Yeah," he nodded. "Flying home for a few days. Got out of a late briefing in San Diego." Rachel blinked. "You went from national security to sitting next to me and a fussy baby?" He grinned. "Trust me, this is peaceful. I've seen worse. Iraq, tense sandstorms. This," he gestured around. "This is quiet." She laughed, an honest, full laugh. Even the woman across the aisle smiled at the sound. Marcus leaned slightly toward her. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "You didn't fold. That matters. A lot of people would have apologized just to avoid the conflict. But you didn't. You stood your ground, for yourself and your kids." Rachel's throat tightened. She swallowed the emotion and whispered, "Thank you." He nodded once, then turned back to his seat. Just as Rachel began to relax, the plane jolted. A sharp dip. Overhead bins rattled, and plastic cups clinked in shaky hands. Turbulence. Eli grabbed her arm. The baby stirred. "It's okay, baby," she murmured, bracing herself. The seatbelt sign dinged overhead, and the captain's voice came through the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit a patch of turbulence. Should be brief. Flight attendants, please take your seats." Rachel gripped the armrest. Not because of the height, but because once that cabin door sealed, there was no stepping away. No timeout. No escape. Another jolt rocked the plane. A few startled gasps rose around the cabin. Marcus didn't flinch. His hands rested calmly on his knees, eyes steady on the seat ahead. "You good?" he asked quietly. Rachel tried to play it off, but her laugh betrayed her nerves. "Yeah, I'm just not a fan of falling from the sky." Marcus offered a reassuring smile. "You're not falling. Planes are made for this. Turbulence just feels worse than it is, like potholes in the air." She nodded, her breathing a little slower now. His voice had a way of settling things, like grounding wires during a storm. Then he leaned a little closer, voice soft but sure. "You've already gotten through harder stuff today. You've got this too." It wasn't said to impress her, it was said like truth. And somehow it stuck. The baby stirred, letting out a sleepy whimper. Rachel rocked gently, whispering as Eli closed his eyes beside her, repeating, "Almost over, almost over." And then, like a curtain being drawn back, the air smoothed out. No more shaking. Just quiet forward motion. The worst had passed. You could feel the shift. People began to breathe again. A few resumed their conversations. One woman even chuckled softly 2 rows up. Rachel let her head fall back with a soft sigh. "Thank you," she whispered again, this time not just for the help, but for the presence. And then the descent began. The wheels hit the tarmac with a soft thud, followed by the usual screech of brakes and that shared sense of relief among strangers. Rachel hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding her breath until it finally escaped her lungs. "We made it," Eli said with a grin, eyes wide as he looked out the window. Rachel smiled, brushing his hair away from his forehead. The baby blinked up at her, yawning. Around them, passengers popped up the moment the wheels stopped, ignoring the glowing seatbelt sign. The man behind them stood too, quick, abrupt, yanking his bag from the overhead bin like he couldn't get away fast enough. No eye contact. No words. Just gone. Rachel didn't mind. Let him go. She waited. No rush. Just a deep breath, a long pause, and the quiet strength to stand on her own time. Marcus stayed put, steady and unshaken as the crowd thinned around them. Rachel turned toward him, her voice quieter now. "I really mean it. Thank you. I don't even have the words for what that meant." "You don't need to explain," he said, his tone gentle. "You showed it, just by showing up for your kids." She hesitated, then added with a small shake of her head, "I don't know how you stayed that calm." He gave a half shrug. "You get used to it. But honestly, it wasn't about me. I've got a daughter, 12 years old. And the whole time, I kept thinking, if she were in your shoes someday, would I want someone to speak up for her? Or just sit back and stay quiet?" Rachel's throat tightened. She nodded slowly. "That's the thing," he added. "People think it takes a fight to stand up. It doesn't. Just a little courage. Just enough to say, that's not okay." There was a pause, brief but full. Then, from a few rows behind, someone tapped Rachel's shoulder. A woman in a business suit, maybe mid-40s, gave a soft, knowing smile. "I just wanted to say,
I saw what happened," she said.
and you handled that with more grace than I ever could." Rachel blinked. "Oh, thank you." The woman then glanced toward Marcus. "And you? I hope it's okay to say this, but that was one of the most respectful things I've seen in a long time. You didn't make a scene. You just made it clear." Marcus offered a polite nod. "Appreciate that." She reached for her carry-on, then paused again. "We need more people like you. Both of you. Keep taking care of those kids." And just like that, she was gone. Rachel sat still for a beat, letting the words catch up to her. Then she turned to Marcus, a quiet smile pulling at her lips. "I'd offer to buy you a coffee or something, but I've got 2 little passengers that run on 0 patience." He chuckled. "Rain check. Take care of yourself, Rachel." She nodded, then slowly stood and guided Eli and the baby into the aisle. As they neared the jet bridge, a man she hadn't noticed, headphones around his neck pillow slung to the side, flashed her a thumbs up. No words, just a nod, like he'd seen it too. The baby stirred, but Rachel didn't feel burdened by it anymore. Something inside her had shifted. She didn't feel invisible this time, or small. As she stepped through the jet bridge, she glanced back. Marcus was still there, helping an elderly woman reach her suitcase from the overhead bin, calm and grounded as ever. What Rachel didn't know was that someone, somewhere in row 19, had caught the entire exchange on their phone. And before her luggage even made it to the carousel, the video had found its way online. She didn't see it until 2 days later. She was sitting on her sister's couch in Atlanta, a bowl of reheated mac and cheese in her lap, the baby asleep nearby, and Eli on the floor building a tower out of plastic blocks. Her sister walked in, holding up her phone with a look of disbelief. "Rachel," she said, "is this you?" The video was shaky, just under 2 minutes long, filmed from across the aisle, but it said everything. There she was, mid-flight, Eli tucked beside her, the tension still fresh in her memory. The sharp comment from the man behind. And then Marcus. Not loud, not angry, just steady. His voice cutting through the noise with one simple line. "Sir, that's enough." Rachel felt her stomach turn as she watched the clip. "Where did you find this?" she asked, eyes fixed on the screen. "It's everywhere," her sister replied. "Someone filmed it on the plane, posted it to TikTok. A teacher in Phoenix reshared it on Facebook. Now it's viral. People are calling him the guy in 17D. Rachel kept watching, scrolling past thousands of comments. Praise for his calm. Support for her. Stories from other parents who had felt cornered, judged, or ignored in public with their kids. But one comment stopped her cold. Courage doesn't always show up with fists. Sometimes it sounds like someone saying, "This isn't okay." It hit her, not just because of what happened on that flight, but because of what it revealed. How many people sit back in silence? How often we turn away because it's easier than stepping up? And how powerful kindness becomes when spoken with clarity. She never heard from Marcus again, but she didn't need to. He didn't step in for applause. He did it because it mattered. And without even realizing it, he gave her children something bigger than protection. He gave them a moment they'd remember. A real-life example of someone standing up for what's right, without shouting, without force. Just truth. That's the kind of moment that leaves a mark. That teaches something real. If you've ever watched someone be treated unfairly and felt that tug to speak, you probably should. If you didn't, don't dwell on it.
Just don't stay quiet the next time.
And if you've ever felt invisible in your struggle, know this: someone might be watching. Someone might see you, even if they haven't said so yet. Say something when it matters. Stand when it counts. Because what feels like a small act to you might be everything to someone else. If this story meant something to you, like and share it. Pass it forward. A little quiet courage goes a long way. Kindly subscribe for more inspiring stories.